Mayor Breed is running for re-election, and that's why we are here, to support Mayor Breed in her bid for re-election so that she can continue to do the great works that she's doing in the city of San Francisco. And not just San Francisco, the neighboring cities. And when all these things do well, it's a trickle-down effect that affects all of us. When I met Mayor Breed, I was so humble, for a woman who has come so far. So far, she was born and raised in San Francisco. But one of the things I like about Mayor Breed, some of the things that she's doing, and I'll read some of it. She has prioritized policies and programs to address some of the most crucial issues facing the city, including housing, homelessness, workforce development, public safety, climate change, and recovering from this deadly COVID-19 pandemic. And I can go on and on and on. In my language, in my culture, they say that when you see somebody climbing a good tree, the whole village gets behind him to push him. And Mayor Breed is climbing a good tree, and that's why we are here, to help her push her to get to the top. Thank you.
When I do this job as mayor, I am unapologetic about the decisions I make because oftentimes they come from my experience. Some of the biggest challenges that Los Angeles is facing are some of the same challenges San Francisco face around safety, around homelessness, substance use disorder, and behavioral health challenges. Those are things that we are grappling with, not just here, but throughout the entire state. And part of what my push is not to keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. How do we get creative about the solutions and then be courageous about the fact that it may make people uncomfortable? So starting with the challenges around homelessness, in San Francisco, I'm really proud that in the most recent point in time count, which is coming out fairly soon and is not public, we have seen a slight decline in homelessness. I had anticipated an increase, but that was significant. But that didn't just happen. When I became mayor, I looked at our shelter system. I looked at our supportive housing. I looked at our entire affordable housing portfolio and made changes to make it easier for people to get access to this housing. And last year in the budget, we invested $1 billion for the next 2 years, specifically to target and get people housed and to keep them housed. Not just to put a roof over their head, but how do we make sure their rent is paid, that they have food, and that we figure out the challenges that they have in order to connect them to the right opportunities, whether it's job, whether it's health, whatever the case is. I'm really proud of what we've done around homelessness, even though we know that there are so many other people who need help. And I think people believe that homelessness is just a roof over your head. But the people I meet with, the people that are out there are suffering from various challenges, including real behavioral health challenges. And this is where our need for state changes, and I'm supporting a bill by Assemblymember Eggman, who is going to help us to completely reform our behavioral health system. As mayor, I am trying every single day to make those kinds of changes. My ultimate goal in the investments we're making and the policy decisions is to ensure that people who are growing up in San Francisco now, who are growing up in poverty and similar circumstances, my goal is to make sure that committing a legal act or crossing the line in any way is no longer an option. And some of the programs that we've been able to implement include two things that I'm most proud of. Number one, opportunities for all, where every high school student in San Francisco, no matter what your income, no matter what neighborhood you're from, has access to a paid internship so that they can learn about various fields that they may be interested in while they're in high school. I don't want money to be an excuse for why someone can't participate and learn about everything that life has to offer. The other program we implemented is the Dream Keepers Initiative. $60 million invested specifically at the African American community. And people have asked, why focus on the African American community in San Francisco with a population of less than 6% African American? I tell you why. Because that's where the disparities exist. Almost 40% of our homeless population are African American. Those with the behavioral health challenges and those who in fact died from fentanyl overdoses in our city, mostly African American. Those who are the high school dropouts and impacts with our criminal justice system, primarily African American. So it's not about, okay, it's 6% of the population, so 6% of funding goes to African Americans. It's where are the disparities and where are we as a city going to have the courage to make the investments to see real change? I grew up in a neighborhood where, unfortunately, there have been people who, at that time, they were beat by the police, drugs were planted on them, and eventually, sadly, what we've seen in places like San Francisco and all over the country, and it has been, I think, elevated once people saw that horrific video of George Floyd, and sadly, that's not uncommon, but it just, during that time, for some reason, there was a spark where finally people were paying very close attention to really what was happening specifically to African American men in this country as it relates to law enforcement. But before that happened, what I am most proud of in San Francisco is the work we've done around police reforms, because we know what the data said. And our goal was to try to prevent it, to make sure that we hire a more diverse workforce. We do these regular trainings around anti-bias and all those things, and not chasing moving cars. And we put in all the things that everyone was saying to do all over the country, the 5 top things. San Francisco was already doing it, but at the end of the day, we also had to focus on the changes to the culture of the existing department. And so we're still working on it. We're not perfect. We're not where we need to be. But the problem I have in some cases is, on the one hand, yes, for those kinds of officers that have problems with people because race, sexual orientation, or what have you, we need to make sure that they're held accountable when they do things because of that, the same way anybody else is, because of the oath that they take to serve and protect. So I am 100% supportive of that. But what we have, unfortunately, in some cases in San Francisco is, officers who are trying to do their jobs and who are being, prosecuted by our district attorney unfairly. And the focus, has been about going after officers. And yes, I think it's appropriate when it makes sense, but not just for the sake of going after law enforcement, or not just, I don't want law enforcement to be treated the way Black people have been treated by law enforcement in those cases of injustice. Right. So to me, it goes both ways. It goes both ways, and it's sad that we're at a state where the certain laws need to be in place. But I will say what I am excited about is seeing the changes around the reforms. I'm excited about seeing the accountability components, but also now we have different people who are deciding and stepping up and wanting to be a part of law enforcement. And I think diversifying that workforce, and not just race, but also coming from a diverse group of backgrounds, is also critical to ensuring that we have safe communities. So it goes both ways. It's not a one way, but we know there are challenges that continue to persist. And, I really hope that we can eventually get to a better place. And it's important for us not to let up, not to, during the time of George Floyd, to let the momentum go and not continue to push these incentives. But it's not just jumping behind every situation that occurs unless it makes sense to do so and it's the right thing to do.